Welcome to episode 2 of Flo's Fundamentals. This is the part 2 of the starter set fundamentals, focusing on some important mechanics, but not necessarily minimally critical to play the game. These are the sort of things that players will begin to understand their second and third time playing through. The very basics are covered in part 1, so make sure that if you want to understand the basics of Killer Bunnies, if you're new to the game, look at part 1 and then part 2. I mentioned in part 1, Kabbalah Dollar. As a reminder, when you draw it, you play it and save it down immediately. I mentioned you could use it to purchase carrots. Let's look at that in more detail. You actually purchase carrots from the Kabbalah's market. It costs $10 for 1 carrot. You can also purchase cabbage and water cards. Cabbage and water are used to feed your bunny if somebody is attacking it with a feed the bunny card threatening to make it starve to death. If you have a feed the bunny card in one of your bunnies, that bunny will starve if you do not feed it the necessary amounts, in this case 1 cabbage, 1 water, by the end of that turn. So when you are purchasing these cabbage and water cards, you don't necessarily know which amounts you're getting. It costs $3 for 1 card. However, a card could be anywhere between 1 cabbage unit to 10 cabbage units, and of course the same goes for water. There's a bit of a risk versus reward. Is it worth spending the money to try to feed this bunny when I might not be able to get enough? It's very easy to feed 1 cabbage, 1 water. Not so easy to feed 10 cabbage, 10 water. Important to note, as players purchase these supplies, the supplies are never reshuffled into the deck after their use. So if somebody buys all of the cabbage, that player will have all the cabbage and the other players will not be able to purchase any cabbage, and they might have to trade with that player to get access to that cabbage to be able to feed their bunnies. So that is a common strategy you might see in the starter set to purchase all of the food of one supply. There are some cards that edit the prices of the market. So for example, on the left here, we have the high prices on the market. This is just a standard run card. Doesn't require bunny, changes the prices to $4 for a cabbage and $5 for water, so significantly more expensive. More importantly though, in terms of mechanics, we have a card that closes the market. It has some interesting effects. Cards that would normally gain resources from Kabbalah's market no longer work. The exception of choose a carrot cards. So that'd be your choose a carrot, choose 2 carrots, choose 3 carrots, introduced later in expansions. All of those cards will still work, but cards like Supply Surprise will not be able to gain the cabbage, the water, or the carrots. You will still be able to gain the bunny and the dollar if you happen to get the result that's not valid, such as the carrots when the market is closed. You will not get anything, so it's very common to not play these cards when the market is closed. Same thing goes for the baker. Normally, with the baker, a roll of 10 through 12 would be able to choose a carrot, and a roll of 7 through 9 would be able to take a cabbage and a water card. If the market is closed, neither of those results will go through, and only the negative results will actually do anything. So if the market was closed and I rolled anything between 7 and 12, nothing would happen. So it's very common in a closed market situation to see the baker played on your opponents instead, because there is no risk of them gaining any cabbage or water or carrots. I mentioned trading, so I think we should go into more detail on exactly how that works. Killer Bunnies is ultimately a game about social interaction, so there's a lot of trading that goes back and forth. You can trade most anything, including favors. For example, if my opponent threatened me with a weapon, I could say, hey, maybe don't play that weapon on me and I'll give you this Stella that I have. Things like that happen all the time within Killer Bunnies. It's ultimately about the social interaction. Let's just briefly go over what is legal in trading. I mentioned trading for favors is fine. You cannot trade the top and bottom run cards. You could negotiate how you play them, but it still has to be you playing the card. You cannot give another player the card to play it. You cannot randomly swap top and bottom run cards with other players, unless of course you have the special top run rotate, which would allow you to do so. But in normal circumstances, you cannot move those cards once they are set down. You can, however, trade cards from your hand. If you are trading cards from your hand, you have to make sure to do so 1-for-1. That means after the trade, both players will still have 5 cards in their hand. So if I trade 1 card from my hand, I have to receive back a card from my opponent's hand. Resources like Kabbaladala, cabbage, and water have no limits on the amount of times they can be traded. So if I trade someone 5 Kabbaladala, that same 5 Kabbaladala could be traded in the future. In contrast, objects such as bunnies, save specials, and carrots can only be traded once. So for example, if I traded this blue congenial bunny to someone else, that person could not trade that bunny in the future. That bunny is staying where it is. It cannot be traded. Note that does not include effects such as the defector detector that move a bunny forcefully. It only includes the trading mechanics outside of any card effects. The way we designate this is if I trade a bunny to my opponent, we put a traded token on it. These traded tokens are included in a later booster. This has been the second part of Flow's Fundamental Series, so at this point you have everything you need to know to play the starter set of Killer Bunnies. Of course, we haven't gotten into deep strategical thought of Killer Bunnies. Those types of lectures are reserved for the other series, not Flow's Fundamentals. So if you want that sort of information, make sure to refer to those episodes. Looking to the future of Flow's Fundamentals, we will have 1 episode for each booster, so make sure to watch for those. They will cover the essential basic mechanics of each booster. For example, the red booster, we will cover barriers, we will cover the red bunnies, and perhaps some other topics. And as always, Jeff bless.